Virgo, a spirit has been with you since childhood, and you need to know why. There's something no one told you about yourself, not because they hid it, but because no one knew how to name it. Since childhood, you carried a presence. It wasn't exactly a voice. It wasn't an isolated thought. It was something more constant, an inner attention that never switched off, observing every detail of what you did, what you said, what you should have done differently. Most people who knew you saw someone responsible, meticulous, but inside you knew something else. You knew you were never alone with yourself, that there was something always present, always evaluating, always pressing. You may have tried to explain it. You called it anxiety, perfectionism, a personality trait, but none of those names came close enough, because what you feel isn't a characteristic, it's a presence. Presence has an origin. Presence has a history. What no horoscope has ever shown you is where this presence came from and what it's really doing to you. This is what this video will tell you, not what you already know about Virgo, what's hidden within what you know. You grew up learning to pay attention, not by choice, but because paying attention was a way to stay safe. When you knew what was happening, you could prepare. When you anticipated a mistake, you could avoid it. There was a silent intelligence operating long before you had the vocabulary to describe it. And that's how the observer was born, not all at once, but in layers, from small experiences you don't even remember anymore. A correction that hurt more than it should have. A comparison made aloud by someone who didn't consider the weight of their words. An approval that never came. The world taught you that there was a right way to do things, and you internalized that criterion, first as a lesson, then as an identity. At some point, the gaze that came from the outside began to come from within. You no longer needed anyone to point out the mistake. You had already found it yourself. You no longer needed anyone to demand accountability. You had already demanded it before any accountability even arrived. This is the moment when the spirit truly settled in, when external judgment became an inner voice, when Virgo became its own most rigorous evaluator. That voice grew with you. It became more sophisticated. It learned to use your intelligence against you, to disguise itself as reason, as care. That's why it's so difficult to identify it. It doesn't speak like an enemy, it speaks like you. The exhaustion that Virgo feels, and which they rarely manage to explain, doesn't come from work. It doesn't come from external responsibilities. It comes from constantly being connected inward, from processing, evaluating, and revising in real time, even when you're still, even when you're sleeping. There's a part of you that never rests because it never switches off. And this cost accumulates in ways you only realize when you're already too exhausted to name. Imagine an immune system programmed during a time of real threat. It learned to react quickly, to always be on alert. It worked, it protected. But after the threat passed, it didn't receive the message. It's still on high alert, reacting to dangers that no longer exist, not because it's defective, but because no one showed that the war had ended. This is how the spirit that has been with you since childhood works. It was built in a time when watching meant protecting, but it never learned to switch off. And you've spent years operating in a state of alert that doesn't correspond to reality, but which seems so natural that you've mistaken it for. What has just been said, that feeling of being on alert that you didn't ask for and don't know how to turn off, is exactly the core of everything this video will explore. And it's also where most people stop. Acknowledge it, sigh, and continue exactly the same way, because acknowledging it without tools doesn't change anything. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose. It's not a book about astrology in the sense you're used to. It's a map to understand the inner architecture of Virgo, including that spirit you carry, that vigilance that settled in early, that pattern of over-processing everything. The book treats this not as a flaw, but as a language that, once translated, becomes the greatest intelligence you possess. It shows what to do with what you already feel, how to use what constricts you as a compass, not as a shackle. And I know you're still processing what you just heard, that there's something open inside you right now, an unanswered question, a realization that hurts a little. This is exactly the right time to act, not when the discomfort passes. Now, while it's still alive, you can turn it into real transformation. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And before we continue, tell me in the comments, what is the thing you criticize most about yourself that deep down you know is also what makes you more careful with everything that matters? But back to the point, because there was something that this system, this spirit of childhood, was never programmed to consider. Something that lies at the root of the entire Virgo paradox. And that's what the next chapters will reveal. There is a very specific difference between sensitivity and suffering, between perceiving a great deal and being destroyed by what one perceives. Virgos, more often than not, haven't learned this difference. They've learned to use perception reactively, as a defense, as anticipation of harm, as a shield, and in the process, they've lost the other side of that same capacity, the side that creates, that sees ahead, that senses what's wrong before any evidence appears. Imagine a seismograph, not the cold laboratory instrument, but a living seismograph responding to frequencies no other instrument registers. The Earth trembles 1,000 kilometers away, and it already knows. No one around feels anything yet. The environment seems stable, but something in Virgo's internal register has already picked up the signal, already processed it, already formulated a conclusion that will be confirmed weeks later when others are still surprised. This is Virgo's perception. It's not neurosis, it's not an exaggeration, it's an antenna calibrated to frequencies that most people don't even know exist. The problem is that a seismograph that runs permanently, that is never calibrated, that never rests, starts to register interferences as if they were earthquakes. It begins to treat small noises with the same urgency it reserved for real crises. And Virgo reaches a point where it can no longer distinguish, is what I'm feeling a real signal or is my system in overdrive? This confusion is costly. It costs relationships, it costs projects, it costs the peace of an afternoon without guilt, a conversation without analysis, a rest without the voice asking if you're using your time correctly. And here's the disturbing part of it all. The gift and the burden are the same ability that makes Virgo one of the sharpest intelligences in the zodiac is what keeps them from truly sleeping. The same antenna that picks up what nobody else picks up is also the one that picks up what doesn't need to be picked up. And Virgo was never taught to adjust the frequency, only by charging the device. What changes when Virgo learns to distinguish signal from noise is not the intensity of perception, it's what she does with it. And this distinction, simple to name, profound to practice, is the difference between carrying this spirit as a burden and using it as the precision instrument it has always been. The divine path that guides your zodiac, sign to a life of purpose, brings exactly this kind of discernment, not as theory, but as a practical approach from someone who has learned to read their own signs without drowning in them. If you are a Virgo and have ever felt that your own perception system is working against you, this book was made for the exact moment you are in. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. But there's an even deeper point to this story. Because Virgo's extraordinary perception, when misdirected, doesn't just drain, it paralyzes. There is an architect who knows every structural detail of the project he is designing. He sees every potential flaw, every weak point, every decision that could be better. And it is precisely this knowledge that prevents him from signing the blueprint. Because he knows too much about what can go wrong, because the perfection of the imagined project never survives contact with the imperfect reality of construction, and the building remains on paper, an eternal draft of a work that never began. This is not laziness. It's not a lack of ability. It's Virgo's gift turned against itself. It's the same analytical intelligence that would make her the best builder operating as an absolute obstacle to construction. Virgo knows what it wants. It knows how things should be. And this knowledge, so precise, so detailed, becomes the first enemy of the beginning. Because beginning means accepting the imperfection of the process. And Virgo, which internalized the evaluator's gaze early on, has difficulty with this, not because it isn't courageous, but because courage, for Virgo, usually means waiting until conditions are perfect, and perfect conditions never arrive. There's a name for it. It's not perfectionism. That word has been emptied of meaning through overuse. It's protection. It's the same strategy as the child who wouldn't answer until they were sure of the right answer, who wouldn't try until they were guaranteed they wouldn't get it wrong, who learned that mistakes had weight and that carrying that weight in public was unbearable. The spirit of childhood still operates with this logic. It still protects you from error by preventing the beginning. It still confuses caution with wisdom and paralysis with care. And Virgo keeps postponing, revising, perfecting what hasn't even started yet. And life, meanwhile, doesn't wait for the perfect project. What distinguishes the Virgo who accomplishes from the Virgo who eternally prepares is not talent. It is the ability to recognize when the spirit is protecting and when it is sabotaging. To perceive the difference between genuine care and fear disguised as rigor. This does not come naturally. It comes from a change of perspective that needs to be learned because Virgo was not taught it. The book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign Towards a Life of Purpose, addresses Virgo's most silent blind spot, the moment when their analytical intelligence begins to work against their own goals, not as a diagnosis, but as a tool for real discernment, the ability to perceive when rigor serves growth and when it only serves the fear of making mistakes. The book offers a framework for recognizing this pattern before yet another project remains on paper, because Virgo doesn't need more analysis. It needs a perspective that helps it act from what it knows, not from what it fears. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. And then we arrive at what is perhaps the most difficult point of all. Because up to this point, we've talked about what this spirit does to Virgo, how it drains, how it paralyzes, how it uses Virgo's intelligence against itself. But there's a layer that hasn't yet been touched, and it's the one that hurts in a different way, more silently, more constantly. The spirit of childhood, when it settles in as a permanent evaluator, doesn't just judge what Virgo does, it judges what Virgo is. And that's a distinction that most people who live with Virgo never perceive, because from the outside, Virgo seems confident, seems secure, seems like someone who knows exactly what they're doing. But deep down, there's a question that never completely goes away. A doubt, not about the task, not about the project, not about the decision, but about the value of the person doing it, about whether what Virgo is, without the achievements, without the usefulness, without the displayed competence, is enough. Is it worthy of belonging? Is it deserving of being loved without needing to prove anything? This question was planted early. It was planted the moment the observer settled in. Because when a child learns that they need to be good to be accepted, what they also learn, without words in their body, is that there is a version of themselves that is not good enough, and that version needs to be hidden, controlled, kept out of sight. Virgo grew up being very good at many things, and she used that competence as an answer to that silent question, as proof that she deserved to be here, as an argument against the voice that said there was something fundamentally wrong with her. The problem is that competence doesn't heal this wound. Achievement doesn't silence this voice, because the voice isn't evaluating what Virgo does. It's evaluating who Virgo is. And this conversation, this investigation of intrinsic value, of this presence that exists before and beyond anything Virgo produces, is what the spirit of childhood never truly allowed to happen. Naming it is the beginning, not the end. But it is the real beginning. Because as long as Virgo doesn't name what has been with her since childhood, that spirit continues to operate in the shadows, invisible, influential, decisive. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose addresses the deepest level, that of identity, not just behavior. It's about understanding where the impulse behind every Virgo action comes from, especially those performed out of a need to prove something rather than genuine choice. There's a huge difference between acting from force and acting from a need for validation. The book offers precisely that insight, not ready-made answers, but an honest look at what drives Virgo and what paralyzes them when they least need it. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. So what happens when Virgo names someone? I'm not talking about a grand moment of revelation. It's not dramatic, it's almost the opposite. It's an ordinary morning where Virgo is reviewing for the 5th time something that was already finished on Monday, and something stops, a pause, a recognition. The evaluating voice began, and this time Virgo managed to observe it from the outside for a second, as if it was something separate from her. As if it were a visitor who arrived a long time ago and was mistaken for a resident. This second change alters everything, not because it resolves anything, but because it creates distance where there was previously fusion. Where before the Virgin was the voice, now there is the Virgin and there is the voice. And this separation, small, fragile, gradually achieved, is the beginning of a freedom that the Virgin never knew she could have. Imagine a child who was afraid of the dark, who saw shadows moving on the walls and felt their heart race, who cried, who called out. Until one day, someone turned on the light and showed that the shadow that looked like a monster was just the coat hanging on the chair. The shadow didn't disappear, the coat remained there. But the fear completely changed in nature, because now she knew what she was seeing. Naming the spirit of childhood is to ignite that light. It doesn't make the voice disappear. It doesn't eliminate the pattern overnight. But it changes the relationship that Virgo has with it. It makes that presence, which always seemed an autonomous force, greater than Virgo, older than Virgo, reveal what it always was, a learned response. A survival strategy that has become too old for the present that Virgo is living now. And when Virgo begins to realize that she can converse with this presence instead of obeying it, that she can listen to it without being governed by it, that she can be grateful for the protection without paying the price of paralysis, something begins to change, slowly, with relapses, with days when the spirit returns with full force and the analytical voice regains control, but with more and more moments of clarity, with more and more instants when Virgo acts from within herself, not from fear. The divine path that guides your zodiac, sign to a life of purpose, is the kind of book Virgo recognizes as true before finishing the first page, because it doesn't talk about Virgo from the outside. It talks from within, from the place where extraordinary perception and destructive self-criticism coexist without resolving themselves. From the space between what Virgo feels and what she allows others to see. The book is an honest mirror, not to increase the weight of the analysis, but to show that the same intelligence that generated the pattern is capable of transforming it. This work begins now, not when you feel ready, now. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. Because this spirit, this observer who was installed too early, who learned to use the language of Virgo, who disguised himself as conscience and care, was never her enemy. He was her guardian, a guardian too loyal for the size of the house, too rigorous for the level of real threat, too present to let Virgo rest. But guard is not the same as prisoner, and Virgo was not born to live inside what should be protecting her. The intelligence within you, that capacity to perceive, to analyze, to sense what is unspoken, to anticipate what has not yet happened, is not a curse disguised as a gift. It is a gift that has been used as a curse for a long time. The difference between the two lies not in the capacity itself, it lies in who is in control. When Virgo recognizes the spirit of childhood, when it learns to distinguish the voice of fear from the voice of discernment, when it stops using its intelligence to destroy itself and begins to use it to build, what emerges is not careless lightness. It is precision with peace. It is care without exhaustion. It is the same depth, the same attention, the same extraordinary capacity to see what others do not see, but guided by someone who knows they are worthy of being here, regardless of what they produce. This is the Virgo that has always been available. Not in the future when conditions are perfect, not after resolving everything that the inner voice points out as a problem. Now. From the moment you decide to stop being judged by a spirit of the past and begin to be guided by who you truly are. The spirit has been with you since childhood, but it doesn't have to define who you will be from now on.